continuation of involvement in the Erasmus scheme, as we are seeking to continue participation in scientific collaboration as well. But one of the things that I would say about the fate of children in Easterhouse and in other parts of Glasgow is that their life chances have fallen backwards relative to other parts of the United Kingdom as a result of the education policies that the Scottish Government have put in place. It used to be the case that Scotland was ahead of England in international league tables for reading, writing and mathematics. It's now the case that Scotland has fallen behind, and the response of the Scottish Government has been no longer to participate in some of those international comparisons. Hiding from scrutiny is no way to help Scotland's children.
Nikki.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Government invests in new border and control infrastructure to ensure that we can continue to trade smoothly with the EU once we go beyond the transition period, would my right honourable friend agree with me that this will create more local jobs to support ports such as Grimsby and Immingham?
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right. It is the case Grimsby and Immingham are hugely important ports, not just for EU but for rest of the world trade. And as I mentioned earlier in quoting from the authoritative figures who appeared in front of the future relationship with the European Union Select Committee, there are significant opportunities for people to play a role in the expansion of international trade. These are new jobs, jobs which are designed to make sure that Britain goes global.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last September, the Minister acknowledged there is a material risk of long delays at Dover. Will he tell us what his current assessment of that risk is? The Freight Transport Association pointed out there are only 300 spaces in the lorry park at Calais, where thousands of lorries coming from Dover are likely to be checked every day. Is he now proposing that all 10,000 lorries heading for Dover will be checked somewhere in the UK before they arrive there? How many officials will it require to carry out those checks? And will he tell us the short list of the locations where those checks might be carried out?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for referring back to the time when, of course, I appeared in front of a select committee chaired by the member for Leeds Central. The situation has changed since then. And it has changed as a result of the investment that we've put into infrastructure and the refinement of systems and greater clarity. And I should say that I quoted earlier the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover, Tim Reardon, and he said of hauliers, it is fair to say they are likely to be ready because the requirements that they have to fulfil have been set out very clearly for some time now. So I'm confident that the steps that we've already taken and the announcement that we're making today will help ensure the free flow of trade.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of Ynysmore, I have Holyhead Port, which has the second busiest roll-on-roll port in the UK. We've seen investment in Dover. How can my right honourable friend assure me that the freight in Holyhead will be checked? And what does this mean for jobs, skilled employment and investment that is so desperately needed in Ynysmore?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for reminding us of the vital role that the port of Holyhead in Anglesey plays. I had the opportunity to visit Holyhead last summer to see the superb work that was being undertaken by her constituents, and I can assure her that whether it's trade with the Republic of Ireland or beyond, we will do everything we can, working, of course, with the Welsh Government in order to ensure that the commercial opportunities for those in Holyhead who do so much for our trade are enhanced.
We now go to Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Vauxhall and the workers who keep it going are fundamental to Luton's economy, and a third shift of workers are starting so they can meet the high demand for our tremendous Luton-made vans. However, without a tariff-free trade agreement, future investment is uncertain for manufacturing across the country. Without sound bites or slogans, what genuine progress has been made towards a trade deal that protects the future of car manufacturing in the UK?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
Well, the Honourable Lady does make a very important point, and it is the case that the success of the automotive sector, not just in Luton but in Sunderland and across the United Kingdom, is a matter of importance to people across this House, and that's why we're pursuing a zero tariff, zero quota arrangement. It is, of course, the case, as she will know, that there has been significant onshoring of capacity from other European countries into the UK, not least in Sunderland, and that is something that we want to build on. But I will do everything I can in order to ensure ensure that she and other MPs who represent constituencies with significant automotive interests are kept informed about the progress of our negotiations, because, of course, we put the interests of her constituents first.
We now go to Peter Bone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I thank the Secretary of State for coming to the House and updating us, and as he always does on a regular basis. I wonder if he's had an opportunity to see the report today published by the Centre for Social Justice, entitled "It Still Happens Here, Fighting Slavery in the 2020s, which estimates there are 100,000 modern-day slaves in this country, which has been made a lot easier to achieve by the evil human trafficking gangs by allowing free movement of people. Could he confirm to the House from the 1st of January we will take back control of our borders, and one of the huge benefits will be able to clamp down on these evil gangs?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
Well, I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for raising this issue. All the time in this House, he's been a consistent opponent of modern slavery and human trafficking and has done an enormous amount to draw it to the attention of others and to demand and to secure appropriate action. So I think it's only right that members across the House recognise the consistent campaigning energy he's brought to this important issue. I think it's also important to say that as we do take back control of our borders, and indeed as we move to having greater data and a more effective approach towards monitoring who and what comes into this country, then we can play an even more prominent part in dealing with this evil trade.
We now go to Alan Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's no amount of sound bites or slogans can distract from the fact that Brexit, which I regret, has already made a lot of people poorer. That'll only continue. A very concrete example. A married couple in Stirling, my constituency, in their early 70s, in order to, from January, replicate the European health insurance card, which they're losing against their will need to pay £166.22 per month to replicate what they already have. Would the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster like to come to Stirling and explain to them how their freedom and opportunity to pay more money to replicate what they already have makes their life better?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman who was a distinguished member of the European Parliament for raising that case. I'd be more than happy to come to Stirling. I'm more than happy to receive additional information about the specific case that faces his constituents. Again, it would be my pleasure to do everything I can to ensure that we can resolve the system. On the basis of what he says, I think there may be some miscommunication, but let me commit now to doing my very best in order to resolve the situation on behalf of his constituents.
We now go to Robert Helfen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When we leave the EU, we will no longer be subject to the OJEU, and the public sector procurement contracts, as he knows, are now worth around £250 billion per year. So will my right honourable friend change public sector procurement rules to ensure that any large private company bidding for a public sector contract must have an apprenticeship commitment guaranteeing a certain proportion of its workforce as apprentices?
Chancellor.
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very, very important point. He's absolutely right. Outside the European Union, we can shape our own procurement rules in our own interests. He's also right as well that we should do everything possible to encourage the wider spread of apprenticeships, which do so much to improve social mobility and indeed the effectiveness of British manufacturing. I will look in detail at his specific proposal and see what we can do.
Now go to Harold Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further to the earlier question on Holyhead, how much of the £705 million will be going specifically to that port? And in Holyhead, to what purpose?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
Well, I will be able to provide a breakdown port by port and region by region in due course, but of course we want to work with the Welsh Government in order to ensure that we can make sure, not just in Holyhead, but in other ports in Wales, that appropriate infrastructure is in place. And I'm grateful for the Plaid Cymru endorsement of UK Government spending in Wales in order to strengthen our union.
Paul Bristow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does my right honourable friend recall that last year some members opposite were clambering aboard the Eurostar to tell the Commission not to agree a deal? We left with a deal despite what they said and despite their best efforts to block it. Does he agree that we will end the transition period on good terms at the end of the year, despite what some have been saying throughout this process?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. As I said earlier, I exempt the honourable lady from any criticism on this, but there were some members of other parties who did seek to work with the Commission against the interests of this country. And the country decided what it thought of that on the 12th of December last year.
We now go to Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the threat of no-deal Brexit last year, drug stockpiles were established to reduce the risk of shortages, particularly of insulin, which is largely imported from the EU. So what state are these stockpiles in now? And if businesses are struggling to prepare for Brexit in the middle of the COVID crisis, how does he expect healthcare services to manage?
Chancellor of the Duchy.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable lady for making that point. As the whole House knows, she's a very distinguished NHS consultant, and she's absolutely right to raise the question of insulin, along with other drugs and other medical devices that we need. And it is the case that the Secretary of State for Health and his department are working with mine in order to ensure that we have stockpiles for any eventuality. But I'll look forward to updating her with the help of my right honourable friend in due course.
Mark Harper.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I listened carefully to all the questions that were coming from the other side, talking about paperwork and checks. When my right honourable friend is talking about these issues, can he remind the public that actually more than half of our trade comes from outside the European Union? Data is transferred electronically, so there's very little paper, and we only check things where there is a risk to our border. We don't open every vehicle, and we're not going to do that in the future.
Well, my right honourable friend makes an excellent point. He's right. It is sometimes the case that some who comment on these matters take a view of customs procedures which is, how can I put it, an antiquated one, which suggests that every single consignment is opened by a uniformed figure who pokes around for hours on end, when in fact it is a streamlined electronic process, and one which, as he quite rightly points out, has also seen the share of trade that the UK has with the rest of the world grow and the share of trade with the EU diminish, even while we were in the single market. And the changes that we are making will provide us with an opportunity to be even more effectively integrated with the growing economies of the world.
We now go to Kenny McCaskill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Scots were told that remaining in the Union and Brexit would assure Scotland of a powerful voice in the world, whilst independence would mean being a small nation and without influence like Ireland. Now that Ireland has a seat in the UN Security Council, President of the Eurogroup, Chief Economist of the ECB and EU Trade Commissioner, can the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster tell me where's Scotland's powerful equivalent?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, who of course was a very distinguished minister in a previous Scottish government. I'll take nothing away from the achievements of the people of the Republic of Ireland, led as they are by their new Taoiseach Micheál Martin, and they can look confidently to the future. But it is a fact that were it to be the case that the policies that he advocates were to be taken forward, then we would find that there was a border control at Berwick. You couldn't use the pound sterling in sterling, and it would be the case that as a result there would be economic turbulence for the people who I know are closest to his heart. And that's why I believe that we are stronger and better together. And it is the case, of course, that as a result of having talented advocates like him in this Westminster Parliament, we can achieve more for all parts of the United Kingdom.
Gareth Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK leaving the European Union provides some fantastic opportunities for this country. Inevitably, though, as we leave the European Union, there will be new procedures used at the port of Dover. Can I ask my right honourable friend, therefore, what plans the government put into place in order to communicate with foreign lorry drivers going through Kent to ensure that there's no excessive delay for those drivers doing so?
Well, honourable friend makes an important point, and part of the information campaign that we're launching today, as well as being aimed at UK businesses, is also aimed at businesses in the European Union to make sure that they're aware of what they need to do, and awareness is high.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister answer concerned residents living near the site of the lorry park in Kent who will want to know if an assessment of noise and air pollution will be published?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it is the case that there are a number of potential sites in Kent, and we will make sure that whichever site is chosen, that the appropriate procedures are followed in order to safeguard not just the commercial life of the nation, but also the interests of nearby residents.
Richard Graham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, last year the previous head of HMRC said that less than half of the 130,000 UK businesses only exporting to the EU had engaged on likely changes. While understandable then, it's vital that changes now. So while my right honourable friend strives to deliver the comprehensive free trade agreement that everyone on both sides of the English Channel needs, will he also mobilise the army of British Chambers of Commerce, the FSB, growth hubs and other organisations to make sure that their seminars are planned as soon as possible with frequently answered questions, so that when on January the 1st the rules change, our many exporting small businesses do not find this a surprise?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I should say, of course, that he's been a very effective advocate for Britain's global trading future, making sure that rising economies in East Asia have the opportunity of working well with UK businesses. He is also right that we need to work together, government, business representative organisations and others, in order to ensure that businesses are prepared. He's right, we do want a comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU, but whether or not we secure that agreement or not, outside the customs union, we will need to adapt to a new approach, and we need to work together in order to ensure we can do that properly.
Rob Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was asked by a friend yesterday why I wanted to be a Conservative MP. My answer was very simply empowerment. I've always felt that this side of the House is all about giving people the tools and choices to make their own lives better. I wonder, would my right honourable friend agree that after all of the predictions of doom, blatant scaremongering from the opposition parties that we've sadly still seen here today, that it's this word of empowerment that's key to the UK to forge a positive way in the world, upon which we must be completely focused on all sides of this House and in every nation of our union?
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend. It is the case, of course, as we know, that a majority of people in Wales voted to leave the European Union. They did so as part of a United Kingdom because they believed that it was important that more powers flow to this Parliament, as they will also flow to the devolved administrations, so that those who represent them are empowered to take decisions in their name. May I say that when his friend asked him why he wanted to be a Conservative MP, can I say that I'm very glad that he did choose to become a Conservative MP. He is a huge asset to this House. I have to say, though, if anyone were to ask me why I became a Conservative MP, I think that, I can return and reply to the House in due course in exactly why. All I would say is it's a pleasure to be on the same benches as the Honourable Chancellor.
Final question, Rosie Duffield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm greatly concerned, as are very many of my constituents, that the lorry park announced in the newspapers will cause serious tailbacks, another summer of traffic chaos and particular problems for those travelling to the nearest A&E department at William Harvey Hospital. Can the Minister assure me that this issue and that of a potential alarming rise in air pollution, as mentioned by my honourable friend, but not properly addressed or answered, are being addressed properly and seriously for East Kent?
Yes, no, I completely understand. And one of the reasons why I hope that the Honourable Lady will be able to join other Kent MPs in a meeting is to provide her with reassurance on that front.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, point of order, Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. You will recall the urgent question that Mr Speaker kindly granted the Honourable Member for West Worthing last week. So I regret to inform you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Bahrain's highest court today has, via Instagram, announced confirmation of the death sentences against Mohammed Ramadan and Hussein Musa, who were tortured. This is obviously utterly unacceptable, and the risk that these sentences are carried out is imminent, and not least given the UK's direct support for the agencies implicated in their torture and forced confessions, and the Minister saying he would speak publicly and loudly if the death sentences were confirmed today. Have you had any notice, Madam Deputy Speaker, of a statement from the Foreign Office on what they now plan to do, including raising this at the highest levels, including with the King, to urge clemency?
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for giving me notice of this point of order about a clearly very distressing matter. I have not received notice of an oral statement on it, but I'm sure that both his request and his plea for action will have been heard by ministers and the Treasury bench and will be passed back to appropriate ministers. Thank you. 3-minute suspension.